On the World Esports pages, Riot has just announced that they are changing the LCS format for the next summer split for both North America and Europe. North America is going to be moving on to a best-of-3 format that is going to be using 2 different streams in order to broadcast all of the games, while Europe will be moving to a best-of-2 format with a similar stream setup, if I recall correctly, for the site. So this is some exciting news that honestly is good in general, and we should be thankful that we're even receiving such news, but it could have been better in a couple of aspects. But that's honestly nitpicking at the thing. So what I'm going to talk about in this Mangaka's Musing, though, is trying to explain to some fans who maybe not understand why changing up this format is very important to the development, or rather to the evolution, there we go, of the North American and European scenes within League of Legends. So let's talk about the old format first, because we have to understand the problems with the old format, which primarily was incredibly few games. So back in Season 3 and 4, you had about, I think it was a quadruple round robin with the team, with about 8 teams in the LCS. So everyone would play each other a total of 4 times, and in order to get all the games in, there would be these huge super weeks, which, were problematic. Riot shifted away from that format, still sticking with a best-of-1 format, and cut down the games to half, but expanded the teams pool number to 10 from 8. So it was a double round robin. You played everybody twice, and there was no super weeks, which, again, those were a preparation nightmare for all the teams to consider. So the best-of-1 format within League of Legends is a horrible format to go through, because one single game is not enough for a team to decide, rather, within League of Legends if a team is better than another one. Now, in a traditional sport game, which is what Riot tried to model the LCS format after, one game is primarily enough. You have to take into account that there is going to be, with the format of some of those, you would be playing that one team in that one week. Those games would be, quite a long while. Everybody would be on an equal playing field. There was a physical element in the game that is lacking within esports. And so, you always had like the same kind of playing advantages. There's not really a snowball effect within a traditional sport in the way that there is within an esport, or within League of Legends at the very least, building up things like level and gold advantages within a single game. So those kind of factors don't exist, and you could, within those games, one game divided up into a couple sections and quarters, talking about American football here, would be enough. But for League of Legends, that doesn't work, because, within a single game, we've seen some crazy things, all right? Looking back on earlier this year, if you recall, at the mid-seasonal invitational, there was, I believe it was the second game in the final between Edward Gaming from China and SK Telecom from Korea. In the second game, SK Telecom was playing their substitute mid laner, Easyhu, not Faker, and the team had a disastrous level 1, and they fell immediately behind in that game. Now, imagine that kind of circumstance happening out just, in a random regular split game in a best-of-1 format. Because you had this devastating level 1, you've completely thrown away an entire game after a good week's worth of preparation for the match, just because there was a bad level 1 game plan that happened out for you, and this isn't a scrim, you can't reset for it. So, additionally, with the best-of-1 format being a poor indicator of how strong a team is, it also hurt the Western League of Legends scenes in comparison to the Eastern League of Legends scenes in terms of competitive experience. So, consider this, for example. In the LCS era, Dignitas, all right, one of the long-standing organizations that's been around before the LCS era, it's been in that inception, has played probably 2 or 3 best-of-3 series ever. That sounds a little low, but it can't be more than 10, because they didn't make playoffs all too often. They've been relegated a couple of times, but I mean, we're talking about maybe 10, maybe less than 10 best-of-3 games, and best-of-3s are huge in League of Legends because that's the format of your playoffs. That's the or best-of-5s. That's the format of your playoffs that you have. That gives you time within a team to adapt to what game is coming in. Okay, they played this strategy. They use these champions. Okay, now we can ban out this champion. We can try this different strategy. There's a lot of strategic flexibility that can occur within League of Legends due to a best-of format, which was being completely denied for these Western teams in the regular season. Meanwhile, if you compare that, okay, so, Dignitas has been around for years within the LCS era, we're just going to refer to that. Then you get a team like Anarchy, all right? It's a Korean team. It's a new team that started up in the summer 2015 season. They've played more best of threes in that season alone than Dignitas have in their entire 3 years within the competitive scene. You can see how that's an issue. This is a Dignitas being a team that never made playoffs, has no experience outside of that, and then you get suddenly, Anarchy, who's got several seasons of gaming experience with the best of 3 format, if you consider that every game, if you can compare the formats directly, 1 game per match here, possible 3 games per match on Korea's side within the old format. So teams would get less games on stage, they get less experience with it, they'd have less information to work with when it came to figuring out, okay, what problems are we having here, what are these issues that our roster is occurring within here, and then suddenly, you also have this pressure that within the LCS best of 1 format, if you're trying something incredibly experimental, hey, we're going to bring in this guy to substitute here, we're going to try this role swap out, then, you're giving away these games instead of being able to experiment within a match, within 1 game of a match, rather, and then being, okay, that's not working for us, let's, go back to our old format, just stick to what we know. So there's a lot of competitive issues that happen for a best of 1 format, namely being that there's not a whole lot of room to experiment. It can favor cheese strategies. It's something I didn't reference in earlier discussion, but that's another point that just came to mind. You don't get, I think I talked about experience, cheesing. There's not really a whole lot of preparation for it. There's not a whole lot of room, rather, for you to really kind of design creative approaches to handle different teams. You kind of have to figure out the one best approach, go in, hoping that it works. If one of your players has a bad performance and is able to pick it up, then, there can be issues there. But ultimately, the best of 1 format was a terrible format for the LCS region and is a part of why those Western teams would not do well internationally against teams such as the Korean and Chinese squads who had more games. It's not the only problem, or the biggest one even, the larger one being infrastructure issues in comparison of the West and the Eastern scenes, but that's a topic in and of itself. So, moving on from it now, the LCS is going to be having a best of 3 format within the summer split. The European scene is going to be having a best of 2 format in the summer split. So, unfortunately, we're not going to be able to have the spring split being in this format, which is unfortunate because these teams will only have half a year of working under these new formats and having more games to play effectively in order for, these benefits to really kick in for the team and have more practice time. So, I don't expect some sort of like Western upheaval, super development that could occur in comparison to like the Korean teams. That being said, though, Riot will say that they're taking time to prepare for all these things, and that's okay, I suppose, but I also find a little disbelieving that a company who knows that a best of 1 format is terrible for a competitive scene has to take an extra half a year when they already have this offseason to prepare for these changes, unless the debate really took that long on what they were going to do. It's a little weird for me, but at the same time, we're nitpicking here, and ultimately, I am really happy that these format changes are actually going to go through. Now, as to why these formats are different, Riot cites it's a cultural thing on their site. They make a football, soccer pun joke within it of being like, Europe is more used to having tie scenarios. Most of their regular sport leagues have a best of 2 formats. They're used to having ties, whereas in America, you don't really see that. Ties don't occur, and so, it's got to be settled in some way. So that's what they kind of cite for it. Ultimately, it's sort of a lame excuse. I mean, esports is its own thing. It doesn't have to conform to traditional sports. But, I mean, if they want to see, a more fair reason in my mind is that if Riot wants to test out how to handle a best of 2 format production versus a best of 3 format production and, have 2 different teams and kind of see which one works better, that's totally fine. That's something which they imply in saying that, hey, these aren't going to be a permanent fixation. We're going to use the summer split, do these 2 separate styles, experiment with both, using the fact that we control 2 regions as far as broadcasting rights goes to experiment with these 2 approaches that we've been talking about. That way we can figure out which one is really better for it. That's absolutely fair, and that's totally fine. And in a way, it's also kind of nice to have some difference between the North American scene and the EU scene as far as the format goes. And heck, maybe a possibility that we could occur for the year after this one in the 2017 season is that, okay, spring split for NA is best of 2, but for Europe it's best of 3, and then summer split it's best of 3 for NA and then best of 2 for Europe, or both of them go best of 2 for this split and then both go best of 3 for this split. So, there is some possibilities that we could see the format be changed up a little bit within these 2 different styles. So if you want to directly compare and contrast the 2 styles, or the 2 formats rather, briefly between a best of 3 and a best of 2, a best of 2 is obviously a little easier to handle with a broadcast. it will run off a circuit point system where you get more points for winning both of your games, and then you and your opponent will split points if you both win a game within the series, and then if you go out 0-2, you don't get any points for it. That's how that kind of format would work. Similar sort of format to a Korean, except a couple different layers of points based on how the series goes. If it's a 2-0, if it's a 2-1. It's a little easier to set up for the best of two, just because you are going to know that there's only going to be 2 games, and so then it's fairly simple for you to create a schedule and kind of stick within that schedule, just because barring some crazy game that goes on for 70 minutes, which those don't happen every day or every week, you could kind of reliably predict where you're going to be on your broadcast, what teams are going to be playing on that broadcast. Best of 3 is a little more volatile than that, because you can have a quick 2-0 series, you can have longer 2-0 series, you can have 2-1 series, split series, suddenly coming into play here, and you don't know if a series is going to be 2 games or 3 games, and so that can create a little bit of volatility, variation, randomness within when games are going to go on within that scene. But that being said, though, best of 3, there's a clear decisive winner for it. Someone can come out ahead with more points. So probably a little more satisfying in that regard. There's an additional game to be played here. But both of them both formats, what we do have to admit with the similarities here, both formats give the teams opportunities to adjust their strategy over a game and say, hey, this team is going with this approach, so let's ban these champions out, let's try and pick these champions instead, or hey, we tried this one style that worked first in scrims, is not working here, let's revert to this style. So there's definitely more room for experimentation in both formats, and that's something that we're going to start seeing within North America and Europe. So this is the format for the regular season, by the way. The playoff format, I imagine, is going to be largely similar. But the fact that the regular season is going to finally give a series of structure for both the EU and NA scenes is a very good thing for both scenes, because the best of 1 format, it has its advantages, being very quick to broadcast. You get all the games in. It's very good for broadcasting, but as far as providing a competitive experience that is the most exciting for the fans to watch, that is also good practice for the teams and good experience for those rosters to have for higher level of competitive play, best of 1 format completely fails in those regards. And so I, for one, am happy that it is going away eventually. In a perfect world, we get it next split. And, that could very well still be a possibility if fans say, hey, we can trust you, we want you to do this thing, we think it's going to be good, or the players say, hey, just do it next split, we'll work with it. But, we're at the very least guaranteed for a summer split having a best of series format within the Western scene, and that's a very positive thing that can only help try and just improve the enjoyment coming out of the LCS next split, which I think it has quite a lot of potential with the acquisition of, or rather the formation of, a bunch of these quote-unquote super teams, such as Team SM, such as the newly announced H2K. With the talent being consolidated at the top positions and then these new competitive formats coming in, we could very well be moving on to a very exciting and very competitive time for the Western LOL scenes, as far as even just regionally speaking. So it's very exciting as a fan of those scenes to see these developments start to come into play, and so I'm very happy to finally have that on board. So I hope this video kind of clarified for you guys, the fans, as to why it's a huge deal, this format shift coming on in, why it's very beneficial to the Western scene, and how it's going to just overall improve the state of the competitive play within those 2 regions, and why it's very nice to have the best of 1 format going away. So I appreciate you guys watching this video. Have a fantastic day.